Well, hello. Welcome once again to Stuff and Things, where I like to talk about stuff and occasionally even things. I'm your good friend Bradley, and today is a very pleasant Sunday Stuff and Things. And on this pleasant Sunday Stuff and Things, we have many stuff and things to talk about, including upcoming videos, things that you can look forward to on Stuff and Things and Stuff and Things Plays. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Seahawks and the crazy things, at least in my opinion, that they've been doing lately. It's big news. I have to mention it. I'm sorry. We're going to talk a little bit about one of my favorite new directors. Well, actually, he's an old director, but I've sort of recently discovered him, and I've been watching a lot of his films, and I think they're absolutely fantastic. And I have to proselytize this. I have to have you guys watch some of these movies. They're amazing. The fact that Washington State has finally become a mask-free state, or they finally dropped the mask mandate, the very last state to do that. And then, of course, we have a lot of good questions and feedback from you in hashtag askstuffandthings. So let's get into it. All right, what can you look forward to on Stuff and Things and Stuff and Things Plays? Well, I just recorded a video. It's going to be the newest video in the How to Do Stuff and Things series, which you guys seem to really enjoy so far. We've only done one video thus far. It was about how to make an old-fashioned, a very nice cocktail that I like a lot. The next video is going to be how to pronounce Pacific Northwest place names. Now, I don't know if any of you are aware of this. I'm sure many of you are, actually, if you live in the United States. But in the Pacific Northwest, there are quite a few Native American-derived place names. Places like Mukilteo, Snoqualmie, Swinomish. Names, actually, some of those I didn't actually put in the video, but names that might be difficult for people who are not from the Pacific Northwest to pronounce. And it is kind of funny, too, because the way that we in the Pacific Northwest pronounce some of these names isn't necessarily correct. It's just what we do and how we pronounce them. So I guess you have to say it is correct because the people who live in the region are the ones pronouncing those names, and they, I guess, are the final arbiter of how those names are pronounced. So it's not really about correct or not. It's about how Pacific Northwest natives, people who are from the Pacific Northwest, pronounce these names. So I thought that would be fun. If you watch this video, it's going to be on Wednesday, and there are some names that I skipped over because obviously I couldn't do them all. I just did some that I thought were maybe more well-known to people outside of the Pacific Northwest. If there are any burning questions you have about Pacific Northwest place name pronunciation, watch that video Wednesday and then ask me in the comment section, and maybe I'll do a part 2. And then, of course, oh my God, the Elden Ring series on Stuff and Things Plays. This game is so good. I've only played a little bit of it so far. I think I've recorded 9 or 10 episodes. I'm already thinking it might be the very best video game I have ever played in my life. Now, it's too early to say that, obviously. I need to play the entire thing, but my God, is it good. It's so good. And Kevin the Kurt's adventures are continuing in this series. I think it's well worth watching, so please check it out if you haven't already. And then Deathloop is still going on. I want you guys to watch that too. It's a fun series, it's a cool game. I think it has a couple more weeks, maybe 2 or 3 more weeks until that series draws to a close, and then we'll be doing 3 Elden Ring videos a week instead of just 2, because we have the 2 Elden Ring and the 2 Deathloop right now. So please enjoy those videos, watch them, leave some comments, share them, like them, all that good stuff. Thank you. So, earlier in the week, my father called me, and when I answered the phone, he said, "Did you hear the news?" And it sounded like either someone in my family had died or some other sort of horrible tragedy had befallen someone somewhere. When I asked him what the news was, he said that the Seahawks had decided to trade Russell Wilson, their future Hall of Fame quarterback, to the Denver Broncos. Now, I don't know, for the last few weeks before this happened, Pete Carroll was asked directly, Pete Carroll, the coach of the Seahawks, "Are you going to trade Russell Wilson?" And he said, "We are not going to trade Russell Wilson. We have no plans to trade Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is not available for trade." So, outright lie, right off the bat. Second, It's the stupidest thing in the world to trade away your franchise quarterback, your future Hall of Fame quarterback. Now, I know a lot of people out there are going to say, oh, well, he wasn't good the last couple years, or he won it out himself, he was causing problems. I don't care. He is still a franchise quarterback. He will be going to the Hall of Fame eventually. And it's just ridiculous to trade that away. There are so many teams in the NFL right now who are looking for that person. We had that person, and we threw him away. And I think this was just a weird power struggle between Pete Carroll, John Snyder, the GM. They're together in this. They basically have complete control over the team because Paul Allen, the former owner, died. His daughter is nominally in charge, but she doesn't seem super checked in. It seems as though Pete Carroll and John Snyder can run the entire show. And there was a power struggle between Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll, and Pete Carroll ends up winning because he's basically running the team. And I know he wants to go back to this run-heavy sort of offense where the quarterback isn't that important, and that's just not going to work anymore, I don't think, in the NFL. You had Russell Wilson, now you've gotten rid of Russell Wilson, and what are our alternatives? It's just, I'm so annoyed. I'm almost to the point where I'm just going to say, screw you, Seahawks. I don't even want to watch you anymore. We shall see. I've heard some rumors that they might be going after that draft prospect, Kenny Pickett, who has famously small hands, apparently. I guess this is kind of funny. They were measuring Kenny Pickett's hands in the NFL Combine, the pre-draft sort of run-up to the NFL draft, and his hands were only 8.5 inches from pinky to thumb. And so I was like, oh, that's weird. Is that small? I measured mine. Mine are 9 3/4 inches. So what is that? That's like 25-ish centimeters or something like that. Close to 25 centimeters. So my hand span is 1.25 inches longer than Kenny Pickett's, who is perhaps going to be an NFL quarterback, or who will be an NFL quarterback. So I thought that was weird. So I don't know. Do we want small hands, man? Or should we just have kept Russell Wilson? I think I know what the answer is. I have a feeling Denver is going to go on and just win the Super Bowl next year, and it's going to be really freaking annoying. Seahawks. I like films. I also like a lot of foreign films, but my appreciation of film pales in comparison to my fiance, Diamonds. She watches so many movies. I can't even begin to catalog all the films that she's watched or that she continues to watch. In fact, I think she does catalog it. She has a huge list with thousands of titles that she crosses off. She watched the entire Criterion collection, every single movie on that list. She just watches everything, well, not everything, but anything that she considers good. And recently, we have the Criterion channel. It's a great film channel, by the way. If you have access to it, I highly suggest it. It's better than Netflix, better than almost any other movie channel. And we were looking through there, and there was a film she wanted me to see, and it was called Tampopo. Sounds kind of strange. Japanese director Juzo Itami, Tampopo. And it was from 1984, and it sounded like an interesting premise. I mean, kind of strange, kind of quirky. It's about a woman who owns a ramen shop, and the man who comes and tries to help her achieve success in her ramen shop. Okay, just sounds like a kind of a weird, quirky slice of life, if I can talk. But I enjoyed it so much. It was so quirky, so strange. The characters were so engaging. It has a very young Ken Watanabe in there. And I just loved it. It just had such a weird, unique, interesting character to it. And so we started looking through the Criterion channel and found pretty much all of his other films, and we started watching them. We watched The Funeral next. I think that was, which was which? Was The Funeral first and then Tampopo? I'm going to confuse this, but they were either like 84 or 86, one or the other. I can't remember which was which. That was hilarious. It was about a family who has a death in the family, and it goes through this whole process of this very elaborate funeral ritual that they have to go through, and all the craziness that they all get up to when all the family has to come in and they're organizing the proceedings and everything. And then we watched one called Minbo, or The Gentle Art of Japanese, The Gentle Art of Japanese Extortion, I think. And this film was from like early 90s about these Yakuza gangsters who keep frequenting this fancy hotel, and the hotel trying to get rid of them. And they finally hire a woman who is a lawyer who specializes in kind of standing up to the Yakuza and their petty ways of trying to extort money from people. And basically every film that we have watched so far by Juzo Itami stars the same woman. It's his wife. I'm blanking on her name right now. She's great. She's hilarious. These films are hilarious. After we watched Mimbo, we watched the next film that we found called A Taxing Woman. I think in Japanese it's literally Urusai Ona, which is like annoying woman. And she's a Japanese tax inspector going after this man who owns a bunch of love hotels. None of these plots probably sound super interesting to you, but they're all so fun, very funny. There's poignancy, there's some heart to these films. The characters are all great. The actors that Itami uses in his films are really great. There's kind of a Wes Anderson sort of quality to these films, which is interesting. I have to imagine that Wes Anderson has seen these films and they somehow influenced him, just in the way the characters are kind of quirky. There's sort of this almost stage play-like aspect to the films to a certain extent. I'd say especially in The Gentle Art of Japanese Extortion, that really seemed like a Wes Anderson film to me. And these films are just fantastic, and there's actually a tragic story that you could sort of append onto this. The director, Juzo Itami, who is also the husband of the leading lady who he puts in all his films, he was attacked by Yakuza members. After he released The Gentle Art of Japanese Extortion, the Yakuza were angry because they didn't think they were portrayed very well in the film, because he shows them as being just these buffoonish thugs who were trying to extort money from people. They kept threatening him, and finally several of them showed up and they beat him horribly and sliced his face up. So he was injured really badly. And interestingly, this attack, because Juzo Itami was a beloved director in Japan, this attack actually led to a lot of the anti-Yakuza laws that started being passed in the 90s and early 2000s, because they'd always kind of been like winked at or just sort of ignored in Japanese society. And then Itami supposedly committed suicide later. He jumped off the roof of his building where his office was and left behind a suicide note saying that he had been having an affair and that it was going to be, or that he was being accused of having an affair even though he hadn't had an affair, and to prove his innocence, he was going to jump off the roof of this building and kill himself. And to a lot of people, this seemed really fishy. The police still are saying that officially it was ruled a suicide. They don't have any evidence of foul play. But I think later on, a couple Yakuza members admitted that they had gone up to him, taken him to the roof of the building, put a gun in his face and said, "You either jump off and you may survive, or we shoot you in the face and you'll definitely die." I don't know that that's true. There are a lot of people who do think it is true. There are still people who think that actually, yes, he did commit suicide, even though friends and family members say that that was a very uncharacteristic thing for him to have done. And especially in Japan at the time, like, the idea of having an affair would not necessarily have been a career killer or anything, because a lot of Japanese people had mistresses back then, probably still do. So really interesting director, really interesting films. If you have any way of checking out Juzo Itami, especially Tampopo, I think would be a great place to start. I know some of his films are actually on YouTube in their entirety, so you could check that out. So look for Tampopo by Juzo Itami, The Funeral by Juzo Itami, Minbo, or The Gentle Art of Japanese Extortion, that's Minbo, or we just watched A Taxing Woman, and they were all fantastic. We're gonna watch all the rest of his films, and I'm pretty sure they're all gonna be great. Juzo Itami. Fantastic. You see this mask? Hopefully this will be the last time I have to wear one of these in the state of Washington. I'm going to take it off now, ceremoniously. Hey! Masks no more. State of Washington mask mandate finally expired today on March 12th. They were going to have it expire on the 21st, but pretty much no other place in the United States, as far as I know, has a state mandate still going for masks, for indoor mask use. And I think people were getting annoyed enough that our wonderful, wonderful governor, Jay Inslee, decided, okay, we'll do it on the 12th. Especially the fact that I think in my county especially, we have had no new cases for weeks now, or at least a week. So mask mandate over. I went to my local grocery store today, Fred Meyer, and I was curious, like, are people still going to be wearing masks in the Pacific Northwest? On the West Coast, people seem to be more, what's a nice word I can use? Timid, worried about safety, perhaps. And I was curious to know if people would be wearing masks, and they still had the sign on the front of the store saying that there was a mask mandate. It seemed like it hadn't been updated because the mask mandate is over for today. And when I went inside, I would say 50% of the customers and probably 2/3 of the employees were still wearing masks. Now, whenever I talk about any stuff that has anything to do with COVID or anything like that, there are going to be people who get annoyed in the comments. That's okay. I still like you. You can disagree with me, and I will still probably like you as a person. Or if I do dislike you, it won't because you disagree with me about this. So please extend to me that same courtesy. You may not agree with my take on this, but it's just an opinion, and it doesn't affect you in any way, especially if you're watching this from halfway around the world. So, you may remember that I have never been a huge fan of the mask mandate. I always wore them when I was supposed to wear them, but the idea especially of ever wearing a mask outside I found absolutely ridiculous because there is no scientific evidence whatsoever that there was any sort of efficacy or any need to wear a mask outside. I found it absolutely ridiculous, and I still find it so sad when I see someone who's like 22 years old alone at a bus stop wearing a mask, or alone on their bicycle wearing a mask, a cloth mask too, which we also know now, which we knew from the very beginning weren't very useful, and then we decided, oh, actually they are useful, even though we still knew they weren't useful, but our public health officials said that they were, and then finally towards the end they said, oh, actually no, they aren't very useful, you'd have to have an actual N95 mask. But people still wear the cloth mask. If you are a young person alone outside, you don't need a mask. And it just makes me sad to think that people are so ruled by fear, or maybe they're so ruled by worrying about how other people will perceive them. It's so hard for me to relate to being ruled by fear, by letting the media or whatever sort of public health information you're getting lead you to believe that as a young, healthy person, you needed to be worried about this pandemic when you are alone outside. We won't even talk about the indoor mask mandate. I'm glad it's done. I don't think it's necessary anymore. But I don't know. My thoughts are all scattered about this. I've been annoyed about the attempt by people to freak people out, the powers that be trying to freak people out. The information is available. You can look into mortality rates. You can look into mortality rates by age group. You can look into comorbidities. You can tell whether or not you are actually at risk for this. And if you're not really at risk for this, and now that we know that especially with Omicron, the vaccines don't really do much to prevent you from getting it, it might limit or make your symptoms more mild, but it's not going to really reduce the spread or the fact that you can still get it. Like, there are a lot of things that we have been doing as sort of safety theater or just for the appearance of caring that I think we need to stop. We need to be realistic. We need to give people real information, and people need to educate themselves and give themselves real information. There were certain people who are at great risk from COVID, and the vast majority of people are not and were not at great risk. And that's how you should live your life. Well, I'm not going to tell you how you should live your life, but you look at the risk and then you make decisions based on that risk. If you are 12 years old, you have basically no risk from COVID. If you are 6 years old, pretty much no risk. You have less risk from COVID than you have from the common flu. If you are in your 20s, you have about the same risk from COVID as you do from the common flu. You don't wear masks everywhere when the flu season is particularly bad, so you don't need to do that for COVID. If you are morbidly obese, if you are past the age of 60 or 70, if you have a bunch of other comorbidities, you may want to get yourself a nice N95 mask and wear that. For everyone else, I just find it sad that so many people are frightened so much by this boogeyman that they are still altering their lives because of it. End of rant. All right, and now that I've annoyed 50% of you out there, let's jump into the comments. Remember, if you have a question for me and you would like it answered on the Sunday Stuff and Things, tweet at @SATBradley with the hashtag askstuffandthings, and I will do my best to answer your question on the next Sunday Stuff and Things. Also, if you are a Patreon supporter, you can write me messages on Patreon, and if you like, you can leave comments on my YouTube videos with questions as well. It's also good to get feedback from YouTube videos. I like to include some of that in the hashtag askstuffandthings section of the show. But first, via YouTube, from Shinlangan, we have a question. Hello, good friend Bradley. It's a late question, and hopefully I made it to you in time. You did. I know we are not supposed to discuss this openly, but with the current world event, do you think you will ever add an AK teddy bear into your bear collection? So we're getting into euphemisms here. He's talking about firearms. I remember you have an AR teddy bear. How is that coming along? I miss your old teddy bear videos. I am an expat living outside the US now, so I really miss the good old days at the teddy bear range. Anyway, hashtag askstuffandthings. So I don't do any videos about that on the channel anymore because they are either blocked or demonetized or they're just not welcome on YouTube, so I don't post them on YouTube. And no, I don't really have any need or desire for an AK teddy bear. Washington State has been passing a lot of limits to things lately. They just passed a law that limits magazine size to 10 rounds, which I find ridiculous and obnoxious, but we're not going to get into that here. But yeah, it's basically it's kind of a non-starter on YouTube, so I probably won't be posting any more videos about that kind of stuff. Next, from Andrew Vidal. Bradley, any chance of a restock for the red Stuff and Things t-shirts? My lovely wife ordered one for me a few years ago for Christmas and it's getting worn out. Has it been a few years already? And it's time for a replacement. Appreciate all the content both here and on Stuff and Things Plays. Andrew, thank you so much, or thank your wife so much for picking up one of those shirts. I've been looking at this on Teespring, or I guess it's just called Spring now, where my t-shirt storefront is located. You can actually look down below. There should be a little thing on your YouTube video where you can click on those and get t-shirts if you wish. And they have not had that red color in, and I wrote an email asking them if they were going to be getting it in again, and I never got a response from them. I'm hoping it's something they restock eventually. I am thinking of trying to do a refresh on the design and the colors coming up soon, so stay tuned for that. But as of now, I don't know why they don't have the red, and I don't know when they will have it again. So basically, if you order one of those shirts, they make it once it's ordered. And the shirts, the colors that are available are the ones that you can pick from, and those are the colors that I made available. But they don't have the red available right now, and I don't know why. But thank you for the question. Next, from Josh Stivers. Hey Bradley, a question maybe you can answer on the next Sunday Stuff and Things. Elden Ring's massive success has sparked some debate about FromSoftware's notorious difficulty in their games and if they should start adding an easy mode for newcomers. As a big fan of these games, would that ruin the experience for you at all? Just interested in where you stand on that debate. Enjoying the Elden Ring playthrough so far. Thank you, Josh. It's interesting because I don't think Elden Ring has sparked this debate, but pretty much every FromSoftware game that comes out has sparked this debate. These are games that are considered very difficult. They have a reputation for being very difficult, and whenever one of these games comes out, games that I played on the channel like Bloodborne and Sekiro, there will always be some games journalists who have to come out with think pieces about how they are limiting access to their games by making them difficult and that they should open it up to more people. I disagree. And first of all, I don't think these games are as hard as people say they are. I think maybe Sekiro, because there weren't very many options other than for you to just kind of learn how to play the way the game wants you to play and just practice against the different bosses. But all the other games, there are always alternatives. If you come up against a boss or something that you're having trouble defeating, there are always ways to get around it. There are always ways for you to kind of game the system or cheese the game or just gain more levels, grind for levels, and get stronger. I don't think they're that hard. There are definitely parts that I've been frustrated in, but then when you when you overcome that obstacle, it feels good. And that's the whole kind of loop of these games, the whole feedback loop that you get into when you play these games. You play along, you butt your head up against something, it's difficult, you defeat it, you overcome it, you have this release of adrenaline, endorphins, you feel great, then you go on to the next thing. And that's what these games are about. These games aren't really about story. There is story in these games. There's a lot of lore and kind of background to these crazy worlds that they invent. But the main point of these games is that mechanical loop. It's coming up against really difficult enemies and defeating those enemies. And if you put in an easy mode, first of all, you would have to completely rebalance everything about the combat in the game, and I just don't know how you would do that exactly, because these games are very precise with the hitboxes and blocking and attacking. Like, it's all very precise. So I don't know if you would just take half the health bar off of a lot of these bosses. That still might not help people that much, because if they're having trouble with the mechanics, they may not be able to survive long enough to defeat the boss anyway, even if their hit points were less. These games are about this. They're about that struggle and overcoming that struggle. They're not like a game like Uncharted or, Horizon Forbidden West. Games like those that are about the story and it's kind of just like this interactive movie that you're playing. The difficulty doesn't really matter there. You can have an easy mode. People can still appreciate the mechanics and enjoy the story, look at the cutscenes and everything. But the Fromsoft games are different. They don't need an easy mode. I want people to play them the way they're intended to be played. And this idea that every game has to be for everybody, I just don't agree with. I don't think that everything should be for me. There are things that I don't enjoy. There are things that I just don't have interest in. There are things that maybe I can't do, and I'm okay with that. I gravitate towards the things that I do enjoy and that I do like and that I am good at or that I want to get good at. So it's okay. If a game isn't for you, it's okay. Nobody owes you an easy mode or a way of getting through a game. If you can't get through the game, that's fine. You don't need to play them. And I know maybe that sounds horrible, and I'm not talking about accessibility, like for people with disabilities. I don't really know what could be done about that. I'm just talking about people who say, this game is hard. I want to play the game, but I don't want it to be hard. Just don't play the game. That's kind of my opinion. Next, we have some feedback from last week's Sunday Stuff and Things. This is from Cheesy Bacon. We were talking about Syrian Latakia and the difference between Syrian and Cyprian Latakia. And Cheesy Bacon says, former Syrian Latakia maniac here. In my opinion, the remaining Syrian Latakia that is still in circulation today is sadly past its prime. I'm afraid to say that I have essed more tins of 3 Oak Syrian than I'd like to admit. Oh yeah, 3 Oak Syrian. And I started noticing around maybe 2017 that all the Syrian Latakia seemed to be running out of gas in the flavor department. Obviously, that isn't to say that Syrian Latakia was ever as bold as its more brash Cyprian successor. It never was. But suffice to say, I think it has lost much of that special something that originally drew me to it. And that's a very good point. I can't remember if I mentioned that or not when I was talking about Syrian Latakia, but just Latakia blends in general, or English blends, if you cellar them for a long time, if you store them away, it's not like a Virginia-based blend where that just seems to get better and better and better, and you can even have a 20-year-old tin and it still tastes really good. The flavors might be a little mellowed and they might have blended together a little bit, but you are right that with an English blend with Latakia in it, it could almost mellow out to the point where it loses something. It loses some of the oomph. So I would say even 5 years, 6 years for an English blend might be kind of as long as you would want to store that blend. I mean, it'll still be okay, but it's not going to taste as good as it would, maybe after a year or something. So that is a good point. So a lot of the Syrian Latakia, if it is all this old stock, you're tasting it after it has been stored for a very long time, and it probably doesn't taste quite like it did when it was freshly tinned. Next, is this next? Yes, from Blackadder665. For me, Syrian Latakia, mellow, smooth, subtle, deep, very fermented and matured like fallen leaves in the wood at the very end of autumn, or maybe even from the year before, when they're almost black and on a wet day. You can tell the tea is flue cured? I can't tell what he's saying here, but it doesn't slap you in the face with it. Cyprian Latakia, rougher, more smoky, more robust, more direct, feels stronger but probably isn't. It's a little like the difference between regular breakfast bacon, Cyprian, and prosciutto di Parma, Syrian. Interesting analogy. It's like both, I like both, but if I had to choose, I'd definitely take Syrian. There's just a little more to it, it's more interesting. Thank you, Blackadder665. From Pentarax, I don't ring the bell. Okay, I was talking about people not having the notification bell clicked on my channel. I don't ring the bell because I don't want notifications from YouTube. I just don't need them because I always watch YouTube on my PC and I can just look at my list of subscriptions on the left of the screen to see which channels have new videos. And the thought of clogging up my mental space with all the pointless notifications is, well, I just don't need more junk in my life. Sorry that the YouTube algorithm counts bells as such an important metric, but the best I can do is subscribe and like every video. Speaking of liking videos, why don't more people do it? It has always been a mystery to me why some 90% of viewers don't like the videos. Seems to me a very small effort to help channels someone actually likes. Thank you, Pentarax, for that. And I totally understand the notification thing. Totally get it. And thank you very much for liking those videos. And yes, like Pentarax says, just hit the little like thing, little thumbs up. Works well. Next from Ted Stryker. Yes, I would say that Syrian Latakia is a bit more mellow. I would also add that it usually, I think he meant, presents a bit more spice as well, along with a very incense-like essence that I don't really find in Cyprian Latakia. I agree. Thank you for the feedback, everybody, and please leave your feedback for this video and your questions as well. Thank you all so much for watching, but before we go, it's time for the very best part of the show, and that is where I thank our Patreon supporters. The people who support this channel, or these channels on Patreon, are heroes. They help pay for the fancy camera that is filming this video now, the lights that are shining upon me, blends that I can get for review. It is all much appreciated, and every week we like to give a special shout out to those who support the channels at $25 or more a month. People like Kirk Crompton, Private Eye, Glenn, Jason Buckner, Gloria Phillips, Ryan McFadin, Matt Marino, MDoftheNorth, and Kyle. And of course, we can't forget the Maniacs, the crazy people who support the channels at $100 a month. People like our good friend and award-winning author, Peter Straub, stolid, dependable Bob Magee, the wonderful Mr. Luxurious, David Gaudreau, and of course, Ashes of the Phoenix, rising from the ashes to support this channel. Thank you all so much for your support. Thank you all so much for watching these videos, for liking these videos, for commenting on these videos. It is much, much appreciated. Please stay tuned for the, I don't have anything to show you, but the how to pronounce Northwestern or Pacific Northwestern place names in the How to Do Stuff and Things series. More Elden Ring, more Deathloop, more of everything coming up on both channels. But until next time, until we meet again, I've been your good friend Bradley. You've been the audience. This has been Stuff and Things on a very pleasant Sunday Stuff and Things. I'll see you later.